5. P-40 Warhawk. The United States of America started the Lend-Lease program in 1941. It was aimed at helping the Allied forces in their fight against the Germans during World War II. Between 1941 and 1945, the US supplied the Soviet Union with $11.3 billion worth of supplies, and the P-40 Warhawk was just one model out of more than 14,000 airplanes that were given to the USSR. The Warhawk was an American-made single-engine fighter with a wingspan measuring 37 feet, and it had a length of 33.5 feet. It boasted 2 M2 Browning machine guns and carried up to 2,000 pounds of bombs. And during the war, Joseph Stalin's Red Army had a total of 313 of the P-40 warplanes on lease from the United States. In 2017, during the construction of the Crimean Bridge, a crew of workers were searching for old mines or unexploded ordnance when they discovered a P-40 Warhawk in the Kerch Peninsula. During World War II, the Kerch Peninsula saw some fierce fighting between the Nazis and Stalin's Red Army. The Warhawk, they found, was certainly down during one of these fierce battles. The aircraft rested in its shallow grave for over 70 years until the construction crew uncovered it. Upon being raised, it was transported to undergo renovations, and it's been reported that it'll be displayed in a military history exhibit sometime in the future. 4. Ice worm. Russian researchers collected 300 samples of soil from the Arctic in 2018. The frozen specimens, which were found in diverse places, were representative of several geological ages. Back in the lab, worms were found in some of the samples, and they were dated to be 42,000 years old. They were known as nematodes, and they'd spent over 40 millennium frozen solid inside the permafrost. The little critters were transferred to a petri dish and were left for several weeks at a temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit so they could defrost. Amazingly, the worms gradually showed signs of life. The petri dish the worms were left in contained a nutritional medium. The nematodes apparently had no idea that they'd basically been brought back from the dead after thousands of years, as they began to eat as if nothing had happened. This incredible achievement established the benchmark for successful animal cryogenic suspension. It goes without saying that this attracted the curiosity of scientists working to preserve humankind. It's surprising that Pleistocene nematodes can survive having their entire bodies frozen, especially without suffering any negative repercussions. They're shielded in some way from oxidation and ice's destructive effects. Cryomedicine and astrobiology are two medical specialities where this unknown method could be extremely helpful. 3. Liquid sulfur. The summit depth of the Daikoku volcano, which is located in the northern Mariana Islands, is approximately -1,060 feet. Given that the volcano's height is around 7,152 feet, that might not seem all that spectacular. A lake of pure molten sulfur, however, is one of the most unusual sights on Earth and can be seen inside the Daikoku volcano's crater. The only other place we know about where pure molten sulfur occurs is on one of Jupiter's moons called Io. You almost certainly can't afford the fuel to travel there, so unfortunately you're unlikely to see this event firsthand. The volcano's pit of churning black ooze, appropriately called the cauldron, burns at a scorching 369 degrees Fahrenheit. Although the white smoke that comes from one of the nearby craters hints that there may be more molten sulfur down there, we haven't yet been able to investigate it in great depth. But if more sulfur is discovered in the area, the region as a whole may simply contain the key to understanding the beginnings of life. The long-held but much disputed Gaia theory claims that the entire planet is a single, self-regulating organism where all life and non-life work together to keep it alive. By catching part of this sulfur and releasing it into the atmosphere, scientists want to determine if it can be returned to land. If so, sulfur may be the catalyst for Earth's ability to nourish and sustain life, suggesting that there might be something to the Gaia theory after all. Do you think there could be life on Jupiter's moon Io? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. 2. Icebergs. When most people think about the dangers in the ocean, a shark attack is the first thing that comes to mind, or perhaps getting lost at sea. But the truth is, neither of those two examples pose a threat quite like icebergs. For thousands of years, icebergs have been around and, without question, they're one of the most striking formations in the world. An iceberg is essentially a mass of floating freshwater ice that's detached from a glacier or ice shelf, and typically they're more than 16 feet wide. Some of the larger ones are bigger than cities such as Manhattan, Los Angeles, or Chicago. The famous Titanic, along with many other ships that have sunk, is unfortunate evidence that icebergs have great potential to cause danger. Though icebergs are extremely large, only about 1/10 of the formulation is visible above the water's surface, which is where part of the danger stems from. This fact alone makes it rather difficult for sea travelers to determine its size accurately. The International Ice Patrol, a company that keeps an eye on icebergs in the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, was created as a result of so many tragic accidents involving massive chunks of ice. Because of their patrols and reports, ships are now able to navigate through busy marine shipping routes and avoid potentially fatal collisions. Icebergs mostly form in the North Atlantic Ocean near Greenland, but they're also found near Antarctica in the Southern Ocean. After they break off from glaciers, ice shelves, or from a larger iceberg through a process called calving, the icebergs typically travel with the ocean's currents. They'll either end up in the ocean or they'll crash against the land where they were formed. According to the Goddard Institute for Space Studies at NASA, the overall temperature of the planet has risen by 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880. This has resulted in large icebergs becoming more common in ocean waters. The glaciers and ice shelves are more prone to developing cracks due to the higher temperatures, and water on the ice's surface makes those cracks wider until they finally reach a breaking point. Additionally, as more ice melts beneath glaciers and ice sheets, icebergs will move faster into the ocean. In 2000, the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica birthed iceberg B15. It measured 159 miles long and was 20 miles wide. In the years that followed, B15 began to shrink and eventually broke up into two smaller pieces. After 23 years, a small piece of it is still floating around the ocean, but back then it was known as the largest iceberg in recorded history. The topic of icebergs became popular and appealing after the sinking of the Titanic. The size of the iceberg that caused one of the most tragic and famous disasters, which was 400 feet long and 100 feet high, doesn't even compare to the biggest icebergs that are floating around the world's oceans. In truth, it was one of the smaller ones. But if a tiny iceberg can rip into a massive ship, it's hard to imagine what a large one would be capable of. That's exactly the reason why we track icebergs today, and it's why forming the International Ice Patrol was so important. It's necessary to provide some level of protection to defend against these occurrences. The most recent iceberg breakoff occurred in January 2023, which is the second breakoff to happen in the area. Measuring a whopping 598 square miles, it's separated from the 492-foot thick Brunt ice shelf, which is said to be nearly the size of Greater London. The iceberg, named A76A, is currently known as the largest remaining piece of what was once the biggest iceberg floating around in the world's oceans. It broke away from the Ron ice shelf in May 2021 and measured 1,668 square miles. That's much larger than the state of Rhode Island and surpasses the size of Manhattan multiple times. However, it's still only a third the size of the B15 iceberg. The dimensions were proven via satellite imagery, but just a month after detaching from the ice shelf, it broke down into three smaller pieces, known as bergy bits. The breakup of an iceberg typically happens after they reach warmer waters. Iceberg A76A, the largest of the three baby bergs, measured an impressive 84 miles long and 16 miles wide. According to reports, A76A is currently floating around the deep waterway known as the Drake Passage. It connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans between Cape Horn in South Africa and the South Shetland Islands to the north of the Antarctic Peninsula. According to Earth Observatory, the mighty Antarctic circumpolar current drives icebergs east before they're thrown northbound near the equator, where icebergs meet their fate in water that's too warm for them to thrive. 1. Kraken. When you hear about a giant squid, you likely conjure images of old-time sailors being attacked by a massive sea monster. You might imagine huge eyes and impossibly long tentacles ripping a schooner in half with relative ease. And, unfortunately, the truth about these giant creatures is just as terrifying. The scientific community knows little or nothing about the habits of these squids, and so you may be wondering, where did they go? But unfortunately, all researchers really know is what they've heard from tall tales and what they've seen from poor quality pictures. For a long time, scientists have debated whether or not the giant squid is even a real species. The myth goes back to an account from King Sverre of Norway. In this obscure ancient document, Sverre talks about many different sea monsters, with the Kraken being the largest and most terrifying. And, thanks to the king's story, the Kraken was immediately placed in Norse mythology. The legend of a massive squid was so widespread that it even made it into the first modern scientific surveys of the natural world in 18th century Europe. The fact that the giant squid is so elusive does nothing to dispute the legends. Up until recently, all scientists could manage to get was a small glimpse of tentacles or a flash of this mysterious creature going by. When the remains of a massive squid were discovered on a Danish coast in 1853, the myth of the Kraken was transformed into reality. Strangely, the enormous squid was just as baffling as the legend that it gave rise to, and we know very little about it because it occupies such a deep underwater habitat. On September 30th, 2004, Tsunemi Kubodera with the National Science Museum of Japan and whale watcher Kiyoshi Mori captured the first images of a living giant squid in its natural environment. They dropped a 3,000-foot line baited with squid and shrimp over the side of their 5-ton fishing boat on their third journey to a renowned sperm whale hunting area located 602 miles south of Tokyo. And this was where the amazing photographs of the giant squid were captured. After more than 20 attempts that day, a massive squid measuring 26 feet attacked the bait and its tentacle became caught. Then, in the Gulf of Mexico in 2019, Nathan Robinson, an independent researcher based in Valencia, Spain, caught another glimpse of the legendary species while examining footage from a camera intended for covertly watching deep-sea cephalopods. The video is the most recent to emerge from a camera system that was used to record giant squid in deep seas off the coast of Japan in 2012. Since then, the system has also recorded at least 2 other species of elusive deep-sea squids. The camera's discreet design and specialized bait, which are essential to the observation of these intelligent critters, were detailed by Robinson and his team. The technology has the ability to shed light on the deep ocean secrets, which is our planet's biggest and least studied environment. The Medusa camera, a 3-foot cube weighing more than 200 pounds, is used for surveillance. The inventor of the camera knew that deep-sea cephalopods avoid typical sample techniques like trawling nets and noisy light submersibles due to their intellect and acute eyesight. The stealthy Medusa, on the other hand, glides across the deep without making a sound because it utilizes red light illuminators, which are invisible to deep-sea animals. It also has low-light cameras on board. In order to draw in predators like the giant squid, they attach an electronic bait called an e-jelly to the camera. The natural light that many deep-sea creatures produce from their bodies is known as bioluminescence, and the twirling LED lights of the e-jelly imitate a particular jellyfish species' bioluminescent alarm signal. Deep-sea squids are drawn to the lights, despite the fact that they aren't known to consume jellyfish, because they may potentially make a meal of the alleged aggressor. One video clip provided scientists with important insights into the behavior of giant squids. The footage disproved popular theories that the creatures are immobile predators who wait for prey to approach them. Instead, it showed that the squid stalked the e-jelly before planning its attack. According to Robinson, the fact that it was tracking the electronic bait adds to the evidence that these are animals that actively hunt their prey. At long last, they've proven the existence of these magnificent creatures. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll get to see much more of the amazing creatures and learn more about its habits as technology continues to evolve. Do you think you'd survive being attacked by a giant squid? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.